The pot pie had already gone soft around the edges when I heard the front door slam hard enough to shake the hall mirror. Briar stormed in like a gust, heels clicking, hair damp, perfume and wine bleeding off her like she'd just lost an argument in public and wasn't done being furious. She didn't see me. She looked past the dinner, past the folded napkin, past the cast iron pan like it was junk mail on the table. "I reheated your favorite," I said, standing up. My voice was steady because that's what I'd trained it to be. "You said you missed home-cooked." She dropped her bag and didn't even glance at me. "Why are you still up?" Her tone wasn't tired. It was disgust. I stepped forward to take her coat. She jerked her shoulder like I'd slapped her. "Don't do that. Don't start your little routine. I'm done with complicated. Quick note. Before we start, share in the comments how's your day going and where are you joining from. And let's continue." I stood there like an idiot with my hand half raised, watching her stalk over to the table. She looked at the pot pie like it had personally offended her. "This again?" she said, almost laughing. Then she swiped the pan off the table with one arm. It hit the tile and exploded. Steam, crust, chicken, the whole thing. Hot chunks slapped the cabinets. She didn't flinch. "I need something new," she said. Not an exhausted husband staring at a cold plate. Then she turned and walked upstairs like I didn't exist. I didn't yell or beg. I just knelt on the tile and started picking up shards from the serving dish. One caught me in the palm. Blood welled up fast. I wrapped my hand in a paper towel before it could stain the grout. I cleaned everything, floor, counter, oven switch she'd smudged with her purse, and then sat in the dark living room with the lights off, watching the rain streak down the window like slow-motion spit. That was our anniversary dish. I'd used it every February for years. She didn't notice, or if she did, she didn't care. By midnight, the smell of burnt crust had faded. I went to the hall closet, grabbed a blanket, and lay down on the couch. My hand pulsed under the wrap. I stared at the ceiling, not dramatic, just awake. The rain outside was steady. The storm inside the house was quiet now, but it hadn't passed. It had just changed forms. The rain had stopped by morning, but the house still felt damp with it, quiet in that cold, polished way rich homes do when no one's talking. No music, no movement, just the fridge humming behind me like a background actor trying not to mess up the scene. Briar was gone. No note, no sorry about last night, no nothing. Just the smear of last night's perfume still clinging to the stair rail. I didn't expect a speech. That wasn't how she worked. If she ignored something long enough, it stopped being real in her version of events. I sat down with my phone, mostly to check messages from Bright Harbor. I'd been working on the design for their spring charity auction. Wood-framed backdrops, hanging lights, the usual stuff people forget takes time. I wasn't looking to be distracted, but I scrolled social like I always did, and that's when it landed. Keaton Vale, Briar's golden retriever of an executive assistant. Young, always on, always tagging her in vague motivational quotes like they ran a church instead of a jewelry business. His post was a cropped shot of two hands with champagne flutes set on a hotel nightstand. The timestamp was late last night. I wouldn't have blinked if not for the bracelet. Brown leather, small gold clasp. I knew it. I gave it to her 6 weeks ago. It had a nick on the underside where she dropped it on a stone floor at the Broadmoor. You don't forget that kind of detail when you're the one who bent down to pick it up. The caption was a knife with a smile. Nothing like being taken care of when you're not feeling well. Heart emoji. Just enough to be deniable, not enough to be innocent. I stared at the screen so long the phone dimmed. Everything slotted into place like dominoes that had been waiting for a tap. Briar's sudden late-night client dinners. The fights she picked over nothing. The way Keaton started showing up in shoes that cost more than our monthly grocery bill. I didn't scream or slam anything. I walked to the study and opened a drawer that hadn't seen daylight in months. Inside were photos, cheap prints from when we were still broke and happy. I saw one of her laughing in a lawn chair, sunburned, eating a sandwich off a paper towel. I'd built that chair. I remembered her saying, "We're a team, Galen." I won't forget. That hit like static in my teeth. I called Daphne Rowe. She picked up on the third ring. "I need advice," I said. "Not comfort. Just next steps." I told her what I'd seen. "No drama, just facts." She said, "You're not crazy. You're just late to the part she rehearsed without you." Then she gave me a list. Start a timeline, stop using the shared laptop, screenshot everything, and back it up twice. "And Galen," she added, voice flat, "she thinks you're furniture." That's a good thing. Furniture doesn't get watched. I hung up and went back to the post. Saved a screenshot to a private folder. Logged the timestamp, the handle, and the link. Then I turned the phone off and stared at the wall. Not plotting, not panicking. Just adjusting to the truth like a man who realizes the floor's been tilted for years. I wasn't hunting for revenge. I was building armor, quietly. The kind you don't put on to look strong. You put it on because you finally realize someone's been aiming at you this whole time. She was still upstairs when I sat at the kitchen table and opened the mail. Nothing urgent, just catalogs, statements, a bank envelope with both our names on it. I set it aside. If she wanted it, she could open it herself. I didn't wait around. I pulled on a hoodie and left without a word. No coffee pot, no breakfast skillet, no usual noise from my end of the house. That used to be my ritual. Make the place feel warm before she came down like a critic to review the lighting and seasoning. Not anymore. I got in the truck and drove out to the track by Millstone Park, where old men power walked and runners pretended not to hate the wind. I walked until my legs ached and the cold cracked through my skin like static. Afterward, I hit a diner I used to like before everything got wrapped around her schedule. Black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, toast with too much butter. I sat at the counter like a man with a normal morning, not a husband trying to decode silence. When I walked back into the house, Briar was standing at the fridge with her hair tied up and her phone already on speaker. "Where were you?" she asked without looking up. "I've got back-to-back calls and there's nothing prepped." I dropped my keys on the counter and said, "I ate out. There are eggs in the fridge." I didn't explain. I didn't add a sorry or soften the tone. I just left the sentence where it stood. She turned around like she hadn't heard me right. "You didn't think to let me know?" "I didn't think you'd care," I said. Turns out I was right. Her face didn't twist up. She didn't scream. She just blinked a few times like a robot trying to reload the script. Then she grabbed her bag and walked out. I stood in the kitchen until the door shut behind her, then went upstairs. The hallway closet still had old boxes stacked behind holiday junk. I pulled them out one at a time and set them on the carpet. Inside were my tools: cherrywood mallet, hand chisels, my grandfather's square, the sketch pad I used to carry around like it was part of my arm. I unwrapped each piece and lined them up on the floor like I was staging something sacred. I didn't grab a project or fire up a saw. I just laid it all out and stared for a while. After that, I started going through our records, tax folders, property files the post-nut Briar had insisted on 4 years ago when her company landed a 7-figure deal. I found it in a manila envelope behind old insurance docs. I read it twice. The house was mine, clearly in plain language. She'd put that clause in to protect her business. She never expected it to protect me. The next morning, I went to Bright Harbor and asked to see the fundraiser budget. I pointed at a vendor name I didn't recognize and said, "Hey, what's this?" A staffer leaned in and said, "That's someone from Briar's team. They told us to route payment through them." I nodded like it made sense. That night, when Briar walked in and suggested a weekend trip, her voice sounded smooth but empty. I told her maybe. Then I wrote it down. Time, words, expression, everything. I cooked that dinner like I'd cooked 1,000 others. Simple, quiet, just enough for one. I cleaned the pan, wiped the counter, and left her plate in the cabinet. Then I opened my notes and copied the receipt from the consultant line into my timeline, added the staffer's quote, and backed it all up to a flash drive I kept in my sock drawer. The next morning, I met Nico Pruitt at a coffee shop wedged between an urgent care and a chiropractor's office, one of those neutral buildings made to be forgotten. He was already at a booth when I walked in. No sunglasses, no dramatic hat, just a guy in a gray jacket who looked like he didn't want to be remembered. He didn't shake my hand or ask if I was okay. He just said, "Tell me what you're trying to confirm and what you need admissible." I told him the outline. My wife, her assistant, a pattern of nights out, and a picture that could mean anything or everything depending on how stupid I wanted to feel. I made it clear I wasn't looking to burn down her life. I just wanted out without being gutted on the way. Nico nodded once, like that was the only answer he ever got. While he got to work, Daphne introduced me to Ellery Voss, a divorce attorney who looked more like a military historian than a lawyer. 61 serious eyes, no fake warmth. His office didn't have calming plants or soft chairs. It had binders, a legal pad, and the exact kind of lighting that made people sit up straight. But Larry didn't waste time. He said, "Don't make noise until you know what you want." "So what do you want?" I said, "I want out. I want clean. I want to not feel like a punchline every time she walks in the room." "Good," he said. "Then don't fight. Leverage." 10 days later, Nico slid a thick envelope across a Formica table in a half-empty breakfast joint and said, "Look once. Then store it smart." Inside were photos. Briar and Keaton entering a hotel with the ease of 2 people who'd done it before. Keaton holding a high-end shopping bag from a boutique Briar had told me she never had time to visit. In every shot, her body looked relaxed, like someone who hadn't had to perform all day. That part got me more than anything else. The way she leaned into him, the way she smiled without armor. The envelope also had a memory card with audio. Nico had caught them on a restaurant patio. Briar had been drinking, her voice loose. She said, "Galen's useful at home." That's it. She laughed after, not cruel, dismissive, like the way someone laughs at a bad haircut. I didn't break anything. I brought it to Ellery. He opened the file, scanned it, and said, "You got dissipation." Don't touch the joint account yet. Let's plan this clean. We opened a separate checking account at a bank across town. Daphne set up a post office box and walked me through paperwork like it was just another Tuesday. I liked the boredom of it. Boredom meant control. Meanwhile, Nico kept digging. The shell company behind the vendor payment? No website. No address. Just a digital fingerprint and a filing trail that stank of cover-up. He couldn't say who owned it yet, but the design matched every other mess Breyer had started hiding behind. That night I cooked again. One plate, one chair. I didn't ask where she was or leave a light on. I went to bed without waiting for the door. Daphne sat at my kitchen island like she'd done it 100 times, flipping open her laptop without a smile, sleeves rolled, legal pad ready. She didn't make small talk. She just said, "Let's work," and we started. The house was too bright. I'd turned on every overhead light to keep myself alert. Breyer was at the office, which Nico already confirmed meant she had a spa appointment booked under Keaton's name and a couples massage blocked out right after. I didn't mention it to Daphne. I didn't need to. She was here for numbers. We started with joint accounts, the ones Breyer treated like command centers. What she forgot or ignored was that years ago, when she needed clean credit for startup loans, it was my name that helped. A lot of those early accounts had been structured with me as primary. I kept them running out of habit, and she assumed that meant ownership. It didn't. Daphne scrolled slow. "This isn't random," she said. The transfers were monthly. Not exact, but close enough to smell like payroll. 6,800 here, 9,250 there, then a full 12,000 near the holidays. Same shell company Nico had already flagged. The memo lines were lazy. Support, wellness, travel help, as if anyone auditing them wouldn't look deeper. She totaled the line items and leaned back. 141,000, give or take. I stared at that number. My brain didn't stall. It just locked in place. That was money we'd fought over. That was 10 years of arguments about bills, about upgrades we couldn't afford, about the 900 I'd needed for a new heater in my mom's assisted living room, and how Breyer made me feel like I'd tried to steal it. Then came the outlier. One transfer labeled medical emergency, 47,500. I didn't react until Daphne pulled up Keaton's social post from 2 days after the transaction. It was a photo of his wrist with a hospital bracelet and the caption, "Scary nights. Grateful to still be standing." No details. No bill. No diagnosis. "That looks staged," Daphne said. Nico confirmed it later. Keaton checked into urgent care, stayed under 1 hour, walked out without treatment. The money went straight into a lease for a downtown apartment with skyline views and concierge parking. The emergency was a deposit. The risk was never medical, it was exposure. We pulled Bright Harbor's internal reports next. I had access as a volunteer, but I'd never looked this deep. A sponsor's donation, publicly credited to Breyer, had been rerouted through her company and paid again to the same fake vendor. The note said, "Event production," but I built that entire display with donated materials and teenagers from the volunteer program. No contractor touched it. Daphne clicked her pen once. "You have a case," she said. "Not just at home. If you show the board this, they'll act." That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about Breyer stealing from people who still believed in her. I changed the safe code right after we wrapped. Took a photo of the keypad before switching it, just in case. I moved my inheritance, what little was left from my father's accounts, into the separate bank we'd set up. Documented. Clean. No drama. Breyer came home before sunset, hair blown out, spa glow still on her cheeks. She saw Daphne packing up and gave her that icy smile. "Finance friends now?" she asked. Daphne replied without blinking. "Always," and walked past her like smoke. Breyer turned to me. "What's going on?" I said, "You tell me." That night she tried warmth. She leaned against the counter and said, "I've been under pressure." I answered without raising my voice. "You've been under pressure for years." I let the silence grow long. She waited for me to bridge it. I didn't. Before I went to bed, I added a line to the timeline. First time she used charm instead of control. The night air hit hard when she left, but I didn't watch her go. I stayed upstairs sorting what I'd started earlier, drawer by drawer, box by box. I wasn't rushing. I was learning the muscle memory of separation. There's a difference between fantasizing about leaving and training your hands to actually do it. By morning, I'd packed one small bin, my hand tools, my mom's photo, a couple sketches from before everything turned into damage control. I left it in the guest room closet, lid closed, tucked behind some linens she never touched. That afternoon, Breyer texted from her office like nothing had happened. "Need black tie ready by 5. Driver confirmed?" That was all. No greeting. No question mark. Just an order in polite disguise. I steamed the dress but didn't check it for lint. I set her shoes by the entry but didn't polish them. I made sure the driver was still booked, then went into the garage and sat there for 20 minutes with the door open, just listening to birds mess around in the gutters like the house wasn't built to impress anyone. She came home sharp. Hair done, makeup perfect, jaw already tense. She threw her clutch onto the counter and said without looking at me, "I need you to be useful tomorrow. Don't embarrass me with your mopey face." That line should have stung. It didn't. It landed like static. Faint, irritating, forgettable. She stomped upstairs 5 minutes later and yelled down, "Where's my belt?" Her voice had that spoiled edge, like the house had failed her personally. I walked to the closet by the front door. The belt was inside a shopping bag I'd tucked under the coats, a wide black leather strap with a gold buckle that probably cost more than everything in my toolbox combined. I didn't hesitate. I slid it into a plain black trash bag, tied it, and walked through the living room with it like I was taking out leftovers. She came halfway down the stairs and froze. "What are you doing?" I didn't stop. I stepped into the kitchen, lifted the lid, and dropped the bag into the trash can. "Quiet. Final." She stood there, blinking fast like she couldn't believe what she'd seen. "Are you insane?" she snapped. "That belt was limited edition." I looked right at her. "It's worn out. It's clutter. No point keeping trash that takes up space." She exploded, called me pathetic, said I was dead weight, told me I was a house pet she kept out of guilt. Her voice cracked once. Not from sadness, from frustration that I didn't rise to meet her anger. When she finally stopped, chest heaving, I said, "I'm not punishing you. I'm just not performing anymore." That line hit her harder than the trash bag. She didn't respond, just stared, then stormed back upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard her talking on the phone in that fake soft tone she used when she wanted something. 10 minutes after that, the garage door opened and her car peeled out into the rain. I knew where she was going. I didn't care. I climbed the stairs, walked back to the guest room, and opened the bin. I added one more thing, a small wood carving I'd made years ago. Nothing fancy, just something I'd built. I shut the lid and felt how right it felt. Not emotional, practical. My hands knew the job now. She'd barely left the driveway that night before I opened my laptop and sent the email. Ellery had already cleared the paperwork. The house was mine, on record, in writing, signed and notarized back when Breyer thought it was just a formality to secure early funding. Her ego had assumed I'd never touch it. The realtor Ellery recommended was discreet. Older guy, local, respected. We met once after hours. I told him what I needed. Confidentiality, clean process, quick close. No signs, no open house circus. Just a quiet sale to someone who could close without drama. We got lucky. Ruth and Everett Baines, retired teachers from Boulder, showed up for a private tour on a Tuesday morning while Breyer was at some executive leadership retreat where everyone dressed like mountain monks, but charged 6 figures for team building. Ruth had silver curls pulled back in a clip. Everett's hand never left her elbow. They moved through the house slow, gentle, like it had meaning. I showed them the details, lights I'd wired myself, the workbench Breyer never let me finish claiming, a small garden nook she'd once told me was too cluttered for her aesthetic. Ruth smiled and said, "This place feels loved." I didn't correct her. Let her believe it. They made an offer that same day, mostly cash. No financing delays. They wanted to move in by mid-March so their grandkids could visit during spring break. I signed without hesitation. My hand was steady. There wasn't a single part of me that flinched. The house wasn't sacred. It was just a building that had watched me disappear one chore at a time. I negotiated a 7-day leaseback under the pretense of final packing. In truth, it gave me time to move my pieces without Breyer seeing them go. Jared Coombs, the head of our gated community's security, saw the trucks, the paperwork, my name on the title. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded, respectful. Not everyone needs gossip to feel important. I started shedding things that didn't belong to me, not jewelry or her inventory, but the props she used to control the script. Furniture I never sat on. The spare car I paid for but never drove. Designer suits she insisted I wear to charity events, all tailored for an image I never chose. I sold what I could, donated what I didn't want touching the next chapter. A chunk of that money went straight to my mom's care account. Locked down, protected. That was my quiet line in the sand. I wasn't walking into freedom just to trip over another emergency. At the same time, Daphne and I finalized the letter to Bright Harbor's board. It wasn't dramatic, no accusations, just spreadsheets, dates, figures. If they decided to act, it would be their decision, not a husband out for revenge. Then one night, Breyer came home like she'd hit reset, smiling, breezy. She walked past me, touched the fresh flowers I'd put on the table for staging photos, and said, "These are nice. Maybe we should start doing dinner parties again." She sprawled across the couch and started rambling about new hires, media plans, expansion targets. I watched her talk like nothing was shifting underneath her. She looked like a queen holding court, completely unaware that the throne had already been sold. When she finally went upstairs, I stood in the middle of the living room and took in the silence. For the first time in years, it didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Not triumph. Not spite. Just relief. Like the walls were finally giving me back my shape. She still thought she owned everything because she dressed like power and walked like a brand. But the company stake? That was the one thing she'd treated like background noise. Most of it came from early days, startup chaos, last-minute funding, investor strings she didn't fully read. Some shares had landed in my name because my family's cash had helped float her first 2 storefronts. She told people it was for structure. What she meant was she never thought I'd cash them in. Ellery went through the shareholder agreement with a fine-tooth comb. Transfer restrictions didn't block a sale outright. They just required formal notice and waivers filed in advance. We handled it methodically. Time-stamped emails, courier deliveries, certified responses. Everything was traceable. No surprises. No shortcuts. She had no clue. The annual shareholder meeting was set for March 18th, and Breyer was treating it like a coronation. Every night she rehearsed her speech in the mirror. Record growth, luxury expansion, undisputed market presence. I stood outside the door once, listening. Then I walked away before she caught me. She didn't need an audience. She already believed the applause was guaranteed. The person I called next wasn't someone I liked. Hollis Kerr, Breyer's old business partner. The one she'd pushed out in year 3 after a messy internal vote she orchestrated behind closed doors. She humiliated him publicly and buried him in public relations spin. But Hollis hadn't gone quietly. He rebuilt, invested, waited. I respected that. We met in a plain steakhouse just off the highway. Private dining room. No theatrics. Hollis didn't ask about the marriage. He just looked at me and said, "If you're here, she finally did it to you too." She did, I said. I'm not here to get even. I'm here to move fast. I told him I wasn't chasing the highest price. I was trading value for timing. We agreed on a number below market. Still solid, but not the headline she'd expect. It gave Hollis just enough to walk into that meeting with the numbers to challenge her position. Not from outside, from inside. Then Nico dropped the second twist. Keaton had been talking. Not just to Breyer. To Hollis, drip-feeding information for promises of future consulting work and designer scraps. He didn't do it out of loyalty. He did it for upgrade. That mattered, because it meant I didn't have to worry about him flipping suddenly to warn her. His allegiance was to whoever gave him the next rung up the ladder. But Larry handled every transfer. Daphne oversaw the funds and made sure no wire could be challenged. My job was to play it straight, stay invisible, keep my tone even, act like nothing was shifting. The day before the deal closed, I slid a plain manila envelope across the kitchen island. Inside was a basic separation agreement. No venom, just terms. I said, "You sign this, you keep your job. Your reputation stays untouched." She didn't even skim it. Just smirked and said, "You don't get to negotiate." I nodded like that settled it. Then I walked upstairs, shut the bedroom door, and made one call. "Hollis," I said, "we're green. Proceed." I made one last cup of coffee in that kitchen. Same French press, same chipped mug I'd had since before the marriage. The tile was cold under my feet, and the house had that sterile, over-clean smell from the stage flowers and surface polish. No memories left in it, just scentless air and prepped counters. I fed the neighbor's cat through the side gate like I always did when they were out of town. Routine still mattered, even in the final hour. I came back inside, zipped my last bag, and set the keys on the counter, front door, garage, mailbox, and next to them, my wedding ring. Not flung, not buried, just placed. Like a period at the end of a sentence I didn't write. I took a rideshare. Didn't want to give Breyer the satisfaction of calling me dramatic for using the car. The driver, Len Wilcox, was maybe in his early 50s. Wore a ball cap low over his eyes and had that look men get after too many years doing quiet work nobody thanks them for. He glanced at my one suitcase in the rear view and said, "Starting over?" "Yeah." He nodded once and didn't ask anything else. That silence meant more than he probably realized. At the gate, Jared Coombs checked the log, saw my name on the approved move-out schedule, and waved me through without a word. I knew later he'd become part of the paper trail. Not because he'd meant to. Because when Breyer tried to spin her version of the story, he'd stick to the clipboard. Dates, signatures, vehicle logs. No room for fantasy. I headed west, out past Durango. Pine, scrub oak, long quiet stretches of 2-lane road. I pulled into a small rental cottage on a wooded edge where the air smelled like dry bark and old rain. Alden Sayer met me in a flannel shirt with sawdust on the sleeves. He hadn't changed much since high school shop class. Still tall, still blunt. "You hungry?" he asked. I shook my head. He handed me a key anyway. "You can work here when you're ready. No one will push you." That first night, I didn't unpack much. Just laid down on the simple bed, blanket pulled over my chest, and listened to the wind slide through the trees like the house itself was breathing. I didn't dream. The updates started coming in within days. Larry forwarded the first bank notification. Breyer had tried to reverse part of the house transfer, claimed she hadn't authorized the sale, but the deed was clean. Her name wasn't on it. Her signature wasn't needed. Case closed. Next came a message from Daphne. Bright Harbor's board had opened an internal investigation. Reporters were circling. Donors wanted answers. Breyer did what she always did when cornered. She threatened. Emails, legal warnings, public relations spin. It backfired. One board member forwarded Daphne a quote from Breyer. "No one questions me unless they want to lose their seats, too." That got included in the minutes. Then the shareholder meeting hit. Hollis sent me a photo from inside the boardroom, rows of suited silence, Breyer standing at the head of the table, still smiling. She didn't know yet. Then she did. The vote wasn't close. She was removed as chief executive officer, effective immediately. The official language was cold and clipped. The kind of sentence you don't recover from in the business world. Keaton folded faster than I expected. After Breyer's fall, he started texting her, pressuring for money, threatening to leak private records if she didn't pay out. What he didn't realize was that Nico already had the proof. Keaton's shell company trail, the payment fraud, the insider leak. Once lawyers stepped in, he backed off. Last I heard, he'd gone completely quiet. A former colleague of Breyer's called me one evening. I barely remembered the guy. He sounded tired. "She's telling people you were unstable, that you broke under the pressure." "Of course she is," I said. He added, "Nobody's buying it. The paperwork's too tight." The last thing I got was a single line from Hollis. No gloating, just fact. Control is an illusion until it's tested. Yours held. The mountains didn't feel like an escape. They felt like neutral ground. I didn't move out here to be quiet. I moved to remember what it felt like to build something that didn't talk back. The first week I slept deep. Not peaceful, not poetic, just hard. Like my body finally got the message that it didn't have to keep watch. The air up here was sharper, colder. The rain didn't accuse. It just came down, did its job, and left everything cleaner. Alden let me work in the shop without asking a single personal question. I started slow. Sanding, cutting, getting used to the rhythm again. My hands remembered what patience felt like. I made a small bench for the front porch. Straight lines, sturdy build, no decorative flair. When I sat on it and it didn't wobble, I felt something I hadn't in years. Pride that didn't need an audience. I built a routine without asking anyone's permission. Coffee at 6, walk down the ridge trail, then 3 or 4 hours in the workshop. On Tuesdays and Fridays, I helped Alden teach the teenagers from town, kids who needed something besides trouble to keep their hands busy. I didn't preach. I taught them how to square a frame and fix a gouge without trashing the whole board. Larry sent the legal cleanup by mail, one envelope at a time. Finalized asset division. Confirmations about the house. Proof that my mom's care fund was locked in, immune to dispute. I didn't toast or shred the papers. I filed them in a drawer like a man cataloging surgeries that healed but still left scars. Daphne called once a month. She didn't ask how I was. She asked what I needed. The last time she said, "You did it the right way," and hung up. From her, that was the emotional equivalent of a parade. Hollis mailed one final document, the board resolution, signed and sealed. He included a handwritten note. "I won't waste what she built. I'll just build it without her poison." I didn't frame it. I didn't share it. But I didn't throw it out either. I heard from a volunteer that Keaton left town. No press release. No noise. Just vanished when the perks ran dry. Word got back to me that Breyer tried launching some new lifestyle brand online. The comments section tore it apart. I never clicked the link. Sometimes I thought about those early years, the cheap dinners, the nights we dreamed too big, the promises she made when we still felt like underdogs. I didn't rewrite it into tragedy. It had been real once. Then she chose something else. That's the full story. Late summer, Alden pushed me to enter 2 of my pieces in the local maker fair. I did. Both sold before noon. A guy who bought one looked me dead in the eye and said, "You've got honest work." I drove home light, empty truck bed, full chest. The last thing I kept was the ring. Top drawer, wrapped in cloth. Not as a trophy. Not as a warning. Just proof I knew how to come back from being underestimated. Then I stepped outside, sat on the bench I'd built, and watched the sun crawl across the hills like it was heading somewhere better. Hold up for one last thing. Have you ever stayed quiet and made your moves in silence because someone treated you like you didn't matter? If you've got the hype button, tap it to support this video and help it reach more people, then please subscribe and like. It's one click and it means a lot. And drop a comment, even just good story or your take.